Hello there, welcome to the HR Election Special Edition on NTV World. I'm Bhavana Kesi. Millions of Nepalis headed to the polls today to elect a new government. Today's election, held in the aftermath of the September's Gen Z movement, has also been seen as a defining moment for Nepal's political future. 3,406 candidates and 68 political parties contested in the elections that will elect 275 members of the House of Representatives. And the voters' turnout, according to the preliminary figures released by the Election Commission of Nepal, has been recorded at 60%. To better understand the electoral process, monitoring mechanisms, election observation activities, and the overall conduct of the election, we are now joined by a panel of election observers. Joining us are two international election observers, Brisa Magarat Rosales, Executive Director of the Asian Network for Free Elections and FREL, a regional organization dedicated to promoting democratic elections and human rights across Asia. We also have Rona Ann Caritos, Head of Mission and FREL Election Observation Mission. We also are joined in by Dr. Gopal Krishna Siwakoti, Chairperson of the National Election Observation Committee here in Nepal. Welcome to the NTV World and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you also for having us.
To our viewers, before we proceed, to all the viewers watching us live, we'd like to inform that we are taking live questions as well. Please do send your questions through our official Facebook page, NTV World. Election observers, we all know, play a crucial role in strengthening the democratic practice of elections by helping to promote transparency, accountability, and public confidence in the election process. So to begin with, what are the initial election reports that your organizations have received from your on-site election observers? I'd like to start with Dr. Siwakoti first.
First of all, thank you very much for having me in the show. As a national election observation organization, we do set certain benchmarks with regards to audit the entire process from independent perspective. So our observers, first of all, do act in accordance with the internationally recognized principle of domestic observation, and we also do have one set of code of conduct that we apply in the process of election observation. That's number one to start with. Yes, in our election, means this particular election is, as you already know, is an early election, Gen Z movement triggered election. So this election has come to a point with a lot of complications, political vacuum, as well as multiple challenges concerning the holding of the free, fair, and credible elections. So, but by and large, this election has attained the universally accepted certain principles and benchmarks. So, for example, universal adult franchise, human rights friendly electoral process, inclusion as its core component in terms of representation, and the overall management, election management, has been quite satisfactory. So we are always above average in that sense. So this time too, if you compare with the past elections, of course the number of voters turnout seems to be slightly lower than what
the Election Commission has stated, has released the preliminary figures, and the Election Commission of Nepal says the voters turnout is at 60%.
Well, it is again on the lower side than what we have witnessed in the previous elections.
2% lower.
Yeah, 2% or sometimes 5% lower than before. But more or less, the people's sovereignty has been manifested in the ballot. So the dedication, the commitment towards the competitive electoral process has been quite a successful endeavor in this election as well. So we are hoping for a better transition as well as safer landing of the highly complicated and highly charged, political fiasco that this country has witnessed in the recent past. So we're happy. We're happy that election has been conducted in a free, fair, and very much a credible manner, but also with some exceptions of irregularities and little bit of mismanagement, also administrative hurdles, and some other like incidences of sporadic violence, etc. But we can safely say that this is an acceptable election in terms of international benchmarks as well as domestic kind of prerequisites that were set to hold this election.
Brisa, I would like to ask that you are here in Nepal for the first time for the election observation activities. So, your organization, it's ANFREL. So, what are the initial findings that your organizations have find from today's election?
Okay. So for election day or today, so coming from the 303 observed polling centers today by ANFREL observers, so we found the elections peacefully and orderly administered. So it was peacefully and orderly administered, one, because of the highly visible security deployment. So we saw the deployment of different election police, Nepali police, and then at the same time, it actually contributed to the stability and to maintain the orderly and peacefulness of election day. But aside from that also, we have some findings with regard to the persistent problem on accessibility, inclusion, and participation, especially with the participation of elderly voters, persons with disabilities. So we received reports that, of course, the highlighted problem on infrastructure. So it is not that accessible for them. And at the same time, as international election observers and also speaking on behalf of the domestic observers, we found or we faced limitations with regard to access, time limitation on how long can
as
we observe.
As you talk of the challenges regarding the accessibility, how your organization, because you belong to international election observation organization, how the organization like yours do overcome these kinds of hurdles?
Actually, we overcome it by presenting it rightfully to the Election Commission of Nepal, to the members of the parliament, because observation doesn't stop on election day. So we continue it on post-election, and we continue it to our reform advocacy. So we will be here until the next few months, until the next year. So we will follow up with our recommendations. So we will do our best, and we will do what we can in order to institutionalize those.
Regarding the recommendation, we'll come back to you again, but before that, I'd like to ask to Ronan, you have been here in 2022's general elections as well. So what is the difference that you found from last time's 2022's election and this 2026 election, especially given the fact the election this was supposed to happen in 2027 following the full tenure, following 5 years a tenure of the former House of Representatives, the Parliament, but given the scenario at home here, the elections have been declared and today Nepal voted. So what the difference you found from 2022's general election and this election?
Thank you for your question, Vauna. ANFREL was also present in the 2022 general elections. I think I can answer your question in 3 main points. 1, similarity, and 2, differences. In the 2022 general elections, accessibility was and still a concern in the conduct of the elections in the country. It's hard for aging voters and for persons with disability voters to vote. It's understandable because of the natural terrain of the country, but as we said in our statement, reasonable accommodations could be done to address this lack of accessibility in our different polling stations. The 2 differences, if you compare the 2022 general elections to the elections we had today, is 1, the presence of security forces. There are more security forces now compared to the 2022 general elections, and it's quite understandable because of the Gen Z movement last year. The second difference is, again, just like what Bisa mentioned, the accessibility of the polling stations to observers like us. I remember in 2022, it was easy for ANFREL to enter the polling stations. But in the elections today, we've received multiple reports from our observers that it's hard to gain entry in the polling stations. The election police had to call up their superiors to ask for permission for us to go or enter the polling station. So those are the 2 main differences and 1 similarity if you compare the 2022 general elections to the elections that we had today.
Okay, so as you talk about the election security and the election environment, based on your observation, how you found the overall security situation today?
It was good. The presence of the police generally contributed to the peacefulness and the orderliness of the conduct of the elections. But in our statement that we released earlier this evening is the presence of this police, of the Nepali police in particular, with the long firearms inside the polling stations might cause that undue influence or fear in the voters, because we have seen and we've received reports from a number of observers that these Nepali police with the long firearms are beside the voting booth, behind the voting booth, or in front of the voting booth. So that's not regular if we take a look at other elections.
Dr. Sivakoti, how you found the election environment, the security situation today here in Nepal?
Yeah, security-wise, the same old radius was maintained. So the army was on the last circle, and followed by armed police force and Nepal police and the election police. And I believe there is also the presence of intelligence. So overall, due to the presence of the security forces, the situation was under control by and large. But again, there has been always a perceived threat in two ways, because heavy presence of the security forces is not a deterrent factor alone, because people may have a different kind of perception, and the voters may perceive as a kind of threat, a kind of intimidating situation, or maybe some kind of threat that some kind of violence might take place, so that there is a heavy presence of the forces like that. So we are not for holding the militarized election. That is not our purpose. So the more security forces doesn't automatically lead to the better peaceful situation or sense of security among people. So we should really try to strike the correct balance between the number of the presence.
How the election observers do coordinate with the security agencies during the electoral process?
No, it's like this. We visited the highest authority of the Nepal Army, as well as the Nepal Police and other agencies. So they gave us an assurance that the election this time is going to be under control. So that was so we trust the force, actually, So, but again, we face some problem here today, even as the domestic observers. We used to have a free access, as the rights are mentioned also in the code of conduct, that the domestic observers, including the international observers, also do have some rights and privilege. So that was somehow compromised this time. In multiple places in the polling centers, our own observers who have been professionally trained, who have been accredited by the Election Commission as the official observers, were not allowed to enter the polling site and center. That was something we never faced this kind of challenge, with some exceptions in the past. So again, security-wise is okay, because no major incidences took place today, So the sense of security somehow prevailed. So we're happy with the security arrangement. But again, I'd like to repeat that there should be a proper and proportionate kind of presence of the security forces to correctly strike the balance between sense of security among the public and voters, and of course the presence, the size of the security forces. This is always a contentious kind of issue.
Regarding the election commission's officials, how the agencies like yours do carry out a coordination with the officials from the Election Commission of Nepal?
Of course, we start our observation by coordinating with them. This is the 98th time that ANFREL did an election observation mission. So we follow the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation Mission. And one of the conditions there is a timely invitation from the Election Commission. And we received that from the Election Commission of Nepal by December. And after receiving that invitation, so we applied for accreditation. So that's the signal for us to coordinate better with them, to submit all necessary requirements for accreditation and follow the guidelines for international election observation. And at the same time, this is not the first time that we coordinated with the Election Commission of Nepal. We were here in 2023 when we conducted the Asian Electoral Stakeholder Forum. So we conducted with the same persons in the commission, with the same persons in the bureaucracy. So there was already a partnership during that time, and we are banking on that kind of coordination that we did last 2023.
So how long does it take for your organization to submit the final report?
final report. So under the guidelines, we are bound to submit 1 month after the elections.
Okay.
So by April, we need to submit a final report to the Election Commission of Nepal, and at the same time to present to them our findings and recommendations.
Does it apply same with the domestic election observers as well,
But
Dr. Siwakati?
it does, but it is a cumbersome job. In fact, it depends on what kind of organizations you have. For example, New York has thousands of observers covering all 165 constituencies, and thousands of polling stations, centers. So we need to retrieve all the information and the facts and evidences from the field, which is a Herculean task. So it doesn't there should not be a kind of uniformed or universal kind of standard in terms of reporting. But anyway, we'll try to comply with the Election Commission's timeline. But we will produce a preliminary report within a couple of days already, and then for full report, a draft report in that sense will be done within a month, because that's a prescribed date. But again, because there's a lot of data that needs to be verified and cross-checked and validated, so it's not like writing an essay about a cow is a four-footed animal type, because there are so many components, so many areas that we have covered, starting from the right from the date of the announcement of the poll, the pre-poll activities. We have monitored a lot of activities until the cooling hour, and we also need to observe and produce report of the cooling hour specifically, and then the E-Day, D-Day, and a lot of post-election activities, because election is not over. Mm-hmm. Only vote casting, the tendering of the vote is over today, but there are a lot of other unfinished job, starting from counting, then result announcement. We also want to see that actually the winner takes a seat, because that is the last thing we're going to observe. So it's quite.
Dr. Siwakati, I would like to add, across the fields, across the grounds, there are election observers and there are election monitors as well. So how credibility the reports submitted by the election observers are taken as, and do the management bodies take the suggestions and the recommendations presented by the election observers, or they go with the election monitors?
Well, election monitoring job is a bit different, because they have also the power to rectify any malfunctioning or irregularities then and there, or also or reporting to their proper higher authority to rectify it. But our job is independent monitoring. We document, we observe, document whatever we see with independent eyes, very independent perspective. So we do not have that authority and mandate, to go for rectification and to challenge the wrongdoings. In fact, so it is entirely a moral authority that implies in terms of our observation. But we are very much guided by international observation mechanism, the principle, and also our own code of conduct. So our impartial presence in the field is already a kind of a warfare, psychological warfare actually. So in two facets. One, our presence is supposed to kind of create a conducive atmosphere and sense of security among the voters, but at the same time create a kind of a difficult moment for those who have a mindset to indulge in committing irregularities. So that is what our mandate is about. So we do not go beyond that radius. So again, Election Commission has been quite responsive with regards to our observation recommendations, but not entirely one. So, but major recommendation we keep pushing. It's a longer process. Some are futuristic too, very aspirational as well. Some needs to be rectified immediately. So we have been very much engaged in dialogue and advocacy with the Election Commission as well as with other concerned authorities as well. So we are not very unhappy in that sense, but we are not fully satisfied about what we find, what we see, and how we present before the agencies. So it is kind of 50-50 situation.
I'd like to come to Rona.
Yes.
You are international election observer.
Mm-hmm.
So where does Nepal's electoral process do fall according to the international standards?
Well, it falls in the spectrum of a good to very good conduct of elections, because as we mentioned earlier, conduct of today's exercise is done in an orderly and peaceful manner. And that's always what we look at when we observe elections all over Asia and maybe all over the world. So the election today of Nepal has been conducted in an orderly, peaceful manner, according to international standards we hold dear in our respective organizations.
For an international observer, they have to look at themselves to a newer country. So why you feel an international election observer is required to go to another country and to monitor or to observe the election activities there? What is the importance as for you?
But the voters' expectation.
No, what I mean here is that the election observer, the international election observers, they have to look at themselves to another country to conduct the election observation activities. So why the international election observers are much necessary to carry out the election observation activities?
Okay, so the very essence of election observation, you carry that. Actually, I don't want to call it power, but you carry the responsibility of legitimizing or delegitimizing an election based on election standards. So we follow this set of standards and methodology. So as election observation, as election observers, of course, we carry that kind of responsibility. And you want also to see if there is a public confidence with regard to the electoral process and public confidence with regard to the electoral results. So the acceptance of the results is very important, and at the same time, the transition of power, that's something that we are also concerned of.
Right.
So because you also want to check the electoral framework, the electoral institutions, on how the institutions will respond to your recommendations and findings.
So for the wider acceptance of the
Yes.
results. So we are also taking the questions from our social media handles as well, and we have a question from our viewer. So before we continue, I'd like to ask a few questions that we have taken from our social media handles. Adarsh Bandari asked, how was the situation in the constituencies of the heavyweights according to your reports or observations? I would like to start with Dr. Siwakwati.
All right, yes. Well, elections are always confrontational. And this time, the confrontation is not actually witnessed in a greater scale on physical side, but everything is on the tsunami of information. Basically, the tsunami of disinformation, malinformation, misinformation is on the social side. So the curated information, what we have seen, and the what you call astrosurfing, what we have seen so much in this election, is something very much troubling. So more or less in the heavyweight or iconic figures contest election, there has been a little bit of scuffle in one or two places. Otherwise, it's a business as usual. But again, I repeat that the social side has already hijacked the whole integrity of the election this time around.
So this kind of thing usually happens throughout the world. We have seen this tendency across the world as well. Whenever there is an election, the social media platforms, they are usually flooded by the misinformation, disinformation. So as an election observer, what is your finding on that?
Yeah, that is what we have seen right from the beginning is that, yeah, even before the election, during normal time back in 2025, for 3 months, starting from April to June, we Nepalese uploaded 2.8 million, means 28 lakhs fake contents on TikTok platform only. So that shows that how we have been engaged or indulged in this kind of activities. So we can easily imagine that the level of or the magnanimity of the fake contents that has been floating even now on the social media. Even today, during the election day or during the cooling hour also, there has been the flood of misinformation and disinformation, challenging the mindset and sovereignty of the independent voters actually. Because the echo chamber, there are different terminology which has been created because of the algorithm that has hijacked and swayed away our mindset, the independent sovereign votership. So this is very much troubling. So again, just to address this question, we may not have seen a lot of complications or use of muscle power.
The political heavyweights?
Yeah, heavyweight anywhere, but it has already been very much encroached, on the social media. That is really, really troubling for us in order to maintain the sanctity of electoral engineering in our country, and it has become somehow universal as well.
So I'd like to ask Rona as well. You have been here in 2020 general election as well, and this time you are here as well. So the social media engagement, it has definitely increased from last time. So what your organization found regarding the misinformation or disinformation or those kind of engagements in the social media platforms?
Well, just to answer your question in 2 levels. The first level is we've been talking to stakeholders across the spectrum, talking to them about this problem of disinformation, and they've always told us that there's a shift in terms of campaigning as well as the access to information of the voters in the social media. And this is in comparison to the 2022 general elections, where is this balance still between traditional and non-traditional media. So there is now a shift in this election of people going more into online campaigning in terms of the candidates, as well as voters going into the online platforms for their source of electoral information. As to the problem of disinformation, ANFEL does not have a specific online media monitoring in this election, but we know that there is a specific unit in the Election Commission of Nepal that was created specifically together with the security forces of Nepal to monitor disinformation. And we would like to ask the Election Commission for the information or transparency as to how this unit has operated and has worked in their fight against disinformation in this election.
You have been through several countries for the election observation activities. So is there any kind of incident you'd like to recall that was quite surprising or shocking regarding the misinformation or disinformation?
I can talk about my country, the Philippines. The Philippines has been cited as patient zero when it comes to the problem of disinformation.
Okay.
So that's one shocking. And in 2016, or roughly 12 years ago, I hope I get my number correctly, roughly 12 years ago, there was lots of fake accounts, bots, troll accounts. But in our elections, in our last elections, last year, 2025, these troll accounts actually transformed to real accounts.
Okay.
People having this alternative, their alternative version of what is true. So that's what's scary in the Philippines right now. 9 years ago, it was people just creating misinformation, disinformation.
Okay.
Now in the elections last year in the Philippines, we saw that there's actually groups of people believing in an alternative version of what is true. So that's what's scary. There's alternative versions of truth now, especially in the elections.
If I may add also,
Okay.
one particularly a factor that would affect when it comes to monitoring online media, it is the action of an election commission. So looking at different jurisdictions in different countries, because for example, we implemented an online media monitoring in Bangladesh and in the
Okay.
Philippines, but we don't have any social media monitoring here in Nepal. So we could definitely say that the efforts of election commission would really factor in, because if there will be guidelines on how to properly monitor it, and on how to temper it also, on how to monitor official social media pages, or on how to monitor an affiliate pages, so it will make a difference when it comes to doing it with a proper methodology and very systematically way of reporting it. Another factor is the coordination with social media platforms. So even though you have an effort, for example, an election commission has an effort to do social media monitoring, the priority lane, the fast action of social media platforms would also factor in. So the combination of stakeholder partnership is actually the best way to do social media monitoring.
May I add
Would you
quickly
like to
on
add
this?
more?
Yes,
Yeah.
because this is one of the most troubling things
Exactly.
in our daily life, and of course, the disinformation tsunami has really been an issue of critical concern for us. So machine curated, fake accounts, and machine generated public perception, and it takes place somewhere out of the radar, And even the Election Commission or other agencies also cannot
There are
track down.
fact-checking organizations as well. So do the election observer agencies coordinate, or they collaborate with them to fight to tackle this kind of misinformation?
We try, but it's our effort is very minimal in that sense, because the flood, as I said, tsunami is so big that it's like a firefighting, you know, like burning thousands of houses and firefighting. We have 1 or 2 firefighters. So Election Commission has the determination to do that, but it goes beyond their control. And same with us. We also try to collect this information from the field, and then also escalate those kind of information to the social media. But our resources, our expertise is very limited one. So this is a very troubling thing, because everything is artificial. It's all synthetic. You don't even know who is behind it. You don't even know like how 50,000 supporters you can create within an hour, and with varieties of comments. You can command the machine, and machine generates everything. So this is oh my God, this is, I don't know. I think we should have a full consultation if you want to conserve the sanctity of election and the sanctity of our social bond. I think this should be the priority for the nation in the days to come, to control and regulate it.
Dr. Shiwagode, as we talk about the social media engagement, we have another question from our another social media user, Meena Tiwari. See, sometimes there are questions raised against election observers that they might be funded by specific interest, or they interfere with the internal democracy of the country. How can we address this? I would like to start with Brisa.
Okay. That's understandable, because it's always the problem if there's a limited awareness when it comes to the mandate of citizen observers. But with regard to the question on interference and against the interests of the country, of course we stick with the standards that we use in assessing the elections, and at the same time the methodology that we use in order to develop sound findings and recommendations.
So, Rosa.
As Brisa said, it's an understandable question, and these are foreigners coming in to observe a country's domestic electoral exercise, so that's understandable. But just like what Brisa said, we fight that feeling of interference by having a sound methodology when we deploy our observers, and at the same time having a framework to assess and to develop our findings and recommendations as we move forward with this election observation. So it always goes hand in hand, a sound methodology and a good framework, standards to live by.
Dr. Shiwagode, the same question to you as well.
Talking, because sometimes I also become an international observer.
Yeah.
Here I am a domestic observer. So the minute there are elections in other countries, I automatically become an international observer. So our presence is founded on the principle of democracy. Democracy has no border. Human rights is borderless, and the freedom, the political freedom or democratic freedom knows no border, right? So on the basis of that, our presence, in other countries, especially during election observation, is based on a very, very serious conviction and conscience. So we use our conscience, to actually to safeguard, to help safeguard the democratic, polity, the larger freedom, and the electoral sanctity in other countries as well. So it's a reciprocal thing. We invite international observers, and openly, without any constraint. And so we do understand that they have no vested interest, as sometimes there has been some speculation. And because we know that we do not carry any vested interest when you go to other countries for election monitoring or observation, right? So everything is universal, right? This is universally accepted principles that we go to Africa region for election observation. Africans do come here. We go to United States for election observation. Actually, we've also been there, and then they also do come here. So it's because we follow the basic code of conduct and the sanctity within ourselves. We are self-disciplined very much. So even as the domestic observers, it's the same rule follows with regards to our conviction and courage to do that. So there is no any ill intention or any kind of vested interest behind it. cleared.
Okay. So those were the questions from our social media users. If you're watching us live on NTV World, you still can send us questions through our official Facebook page, that is NTV World, and we shall take more questions from our viewers as well. So regarding today's election process, so was there any kind of reports of intimidation, disturbances during the voting process during today? Did your organization receive any such kind of information?
Asking me? Yes, we did, very few. We were anticipating more, given the background and the context of this whole election process. But that it has been very much limited and very much minimal one. But even one incident should not have happened. Actually, there are incidences of like even trying for vote buying and certain level of intimidation, and some degree of violence also took place in couple of polling centers, in fact. But if you look at in totality, the sanctity of election was very much maintained. Yes, but there was no killings. There was no kind of kidnapping of the candidates as such. But there was incidences like beating of one of the independent candidates in the southern plain, and there were incidences of organizing feast, in and around the polling centers, etc. And of course, election campaign materials were also seen in around 4% of the total constituencies, which should not have been there as part of the code of conduct. So we also witnessed that. So, but those are very minimal. So everything has gone like 0.1% or 0.3%, etc. But there is one of the troubling factor is that yes, voters reach to the polling center with their voter ID card, which is issued by the government, with proper photo ID and everything, but their name was not there. So in the election polls that we observe, it's a bit troubling that it's almost 13%, 1-3, but it's not universal in those areas where our observers were there.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise it limits to like 0%, 0.1% or 2% or less than 3%, so which is very much acceptable in that sense.
So during times of such incidences, do election observers intervene or to de-escalate the situation if there is a violent situation there?
We don't.
Okay.
That is not our mandate.
Okay.
First of all, we are again simply observers, but we meticulously observe, and our presence itself is a psychological warfare. That the people know, everybody knows that, there are independent observers, right?
Okay.
So that deters, very much deters the irregularities, right? But we document and we observe, document, and prepare a report so that the whole thrust behind our presence is that it will automatically, or indirectly would discourage them, to commit this kind of irregularities. But again, we are not monitors.
Rona, Dr. Shivakari says that some of the voters, they were unable to find their names in the voters list when they reached the polling centers. Did your organization also receive such kind of information?
We receive a number of reports like that, but these voters were redirected right away to their correct polling station. So the concern was immediately rectified and resolved right away by the polling officials present in the concerned polling station.
Okay, so I'd like to come to Prisa. Given while you talk about the difficulties the voters have to face, there are people with disabilities as well, there are pregnant women, and there are new mothers as well, and elderly citizens as well. What was the situation there at the ground of what the election observers from our organization or you guys found there?
Yeah, in our observation, we put actually intentional questions for us to assess that. So we have questions like, is the polling center wheelchair accessible? Are there hazards? Are there barriers? Is it accessible to persons with disability, elderly voters? So of course, in our reports, we received reports pointing out that there are some problems when it comes to accessibility. But we have already mentioned that with regard to the terrain, uneven slopes, there is a distance coming from the main road to the going to the polling center. It adds to the barrier that the voters experience. So this is actually part of what we saw during the 2022 elections. And hopefully it can be solved by in the future elections, that there should be more reasonable accommodations that can be given to the voters, because we also understand the limitation when it comes to infrastructure, because the schools are already there, the temples are already there, or in other open parking spaces, or in any other open spaces. Probably in future elections there should be better selection of polling centers. There should be reasonable accommodation. For example, you put a priority polling station near the entrance, so it will not be an added barrier that the voters will experience. So those recommendations are recommendations or an actual operations that we saw in other countries to solve the accessibility problem.
So how is accessibility different here in Nepal from the other countries?
There's an inherent problem here in Nepal, especially with the terrain.
Yeah,
so that's inherent problem already. So with the powers within the Election Commission, hopefully they can see also those easily available solutions that can be given to the voters. Just like what I mentioned, you put the polling station near the entrance. So don't add a barrier that they still need to walk going to the queue, although they have a priority lane. So you put it near the entrance, and at the same time choose better polling stations, because we also see that there are accessible polling stations or polling centers. Probably they can consider more of that instead of choosing polling centers with distance, slopes, and at the same time you need to go up like temples. So that's something that the Election Commission
I'd like to come to Dr. Siwakoti. As Nepal is geographically a complex country, we have the news reports as well where a voter has to walk for miles or for hours to reach a polling station. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, as Risa mentioned about inherent challenges, but there are also artificial challenges created, in terms of restriction of the mobility. For example, on the election day, I have been to several other countries during elections that public transportation is very much accessible on that day. In most of the countries. In some countries, we don't even know, how the voting takes place, right? So we need to trust the public. Actually, means the authorities should trust the public that the people with special needs, should have an opportunity for a freer access with regards to mobility on the vehicles for the vehicular movement. That's number one. Number two, what can be done like in other countries? They have practiced, like even in Myanmar or in Sri Lanka, or also in the Philippines, I guess, that there's a system of early voting, so that advanced voting, so that those people, the category of people, should have been allowed to vote in advance, so that they don't have to. They can even go to door to door, or they can also create a kind of a polling center nearby in that area. So advanced voting is very, very important now, as well as the freer mobility in terms of vehicular movement. That is something that restricts. Actually, that also decreases the number that proportion I was talking about. Forget about overseas voting. That's a big kind of fiasco in this country, including the out of district voting. People live in a far-flung area and they have been somehow migrated for work, or there's a floating population in the urban center. But during the voting, they have to go back to their respective constituency and the polling center, right? And that is also hampering in terms of larger turnout, So same thing also applies in a small scale, of course, but right to vote is 100%. It's 100% sovereignty of a voter. So it should not be.
So accessibility to hamper the voters' participation.
Exactly. My vote, if I cannot vote, that means my 100% sovereignty is hijacked, right? It's not a number game, right? It's just not a number game of statistics, but because my participation, my engagement, my say and my ownership in the electoral process, in the democratic process, has been prevented. So that is exactly what every single voter's right to vote, not only right to vote, but also right to be elected or right to be contested, should be honored.
Okay, we have more questions from our social media users. So let's take some more questions from our social media audience. Krishna from Jhapa asks, what new turn will our country take in the wake of this election? Will the change be for better? I'd like to ask this question to Dr. Siwa. Since you are the domestic observer.
Very tricky and very topical questions, actually. Yes, we are always talking about revolution, changes, transformation, transition, sometimes easy transition, sometimes painful transition. This country has been under transition forever. So even to the 2008 first constituent assembly election was a big transition.
Exactly.
So was 2013, and then post new constitution, three layers of election in 2017 was another transition, and this 2022 was the first periodic election. Then we're hoping that we're going to go for a periodic election now in the days to come. Now there is a big haltage. Okay, so I don't know. I'm not a political pundit, neither astrologist or astronomer, anything. I have no clue. But I don't see that we're going to see a very much stable government or stable parliament in the days to come, because of the nature of our electoral system and representation model and character. I don't see at this stage there will be absolute kind of majority command by one political party or something. That's just my guess, guesstimation. So that, and then there will be a lot of horse trading and kind of migration, mixed migration within the in the parliamentary polity. So let's hope for the best, but we have to go for nurturing our democratic system. We should not compromise that particular tenets that we have preserved for so long.
So we have another question as well from Naveen Regmi. Naveen asks, how is Nepal's election management compared to other countries that you have observed? I'd like to ask Rona.
If you compare the management of the election, again, going by the conduct of the elections today, it's really well managed and it's really orderly. And again, we attribute it to the presence of the security forces as well as the enforcement of the polling officials inside the polling station. So it can be compared up to par with the other election management bodies' administration of their elections in their respective country.
Do you like to add anything more on that question?
Yeah, of course. When you speak about election management, it's not only election day also.
Exactly.
It's the entire preparation of the electoral process.
There is pre-polling day, there is main polling day and post-polling days as well.
Yes. And at the same time, we saw, because we also did a pre-election assessment, and we pointed out with regard to the concern on election administration. So it's not only about putting up an orderly election day, but also to the responsiveness of the election commission, and at the same time the enforcement of, for example, when it comes to accountability, like a complaints handling mechanism, and it speaks of their function. So there should be an equal enforcement of the different functions of the electoral management.
Dr. Siwakuti, we are talking about that in Nepal, after adopting the federal structure, we have 3 tiers of elections. We have local level elections as well, and in 2022 we have provincial level elections as well. So how these elections are different? What is the difference as an election observer? What are the differences you find while monitoring or while observing the local level elections, and what are the differences that comes when it comes to the parliamentary elections like today's?
Well, very interesting and ironic thing is that in the federal elections or the parliamentary elections here, the political manifesto as well as the election manifesto is a bit tricky. Because the political parties and the candidates talk about everything about local development, road and tube well and health and hygiene or whatever is related for daily service delivery to the local people, which is the mandate of the local authority, in fact. So there is no proper distinction between the job of the parliamentarians and the job of the locally elected officials, and there is a different mandate and scope and jurisdiction of the provincial assembly, but that has been somehow mismatch here. And so and this time around again, the political parties and candidates started door-to-door campaign without any agenda, because they didn't have a election manifesto ready. That came out, that was produced just recently. So it is very, very important in order to differentiate and distinguish the mandate and scope and jurisdiction and responsibility of the different tiers of government, which is unfortunately not so much happening here. So the one parliamentarian here is so much confined to the local issues, right? And then the mid-level provincial, they are sandwiched. They are partially with local issues and partially with this federal issues. But the scope has not been, of course, it has been determined by the Constitution and other laws and policies. But in totality, the whole federalization and institutionalization of federal process is still in a very infant stage, and is still premature. That is exactly where these three tiers of governments has to be nurtured very much in the days to come, and the democratic institutions that exist in all three levels should be strengthened with more power, resources, and greater autonomy.
Riza, as an election observer, the similar question to Dr. Sivakoti. What happens during the local level elections in other countries, or what is the difference you find while covering the local level elections or the parliamentary elections?
Actually, we don't we are not directly involved when it comes to local elections. Probably I speak on my personal experience, monitoring, observing, and local elections. In local elections, it's much more competitive. It speaks of the different issues with the different constituencies, districts, and you will be hearing a lot of, probably there will be a lot of violence, and it will be highly competitive compared it to national elections. So that's the usual comparison that we saw when it comes to having a national and local elections.
Just to add to what Lisa said, when we talk about local elections in other countries, people relate to it more. People feel the local government more in their daily lives compared to the national government or the national elections, meaning people are more invested. That's why what Lisa mentioned earlier, there's more violence. There's a tendency to have more violence in local elections because for people, it's personal to them, because it's their government, the government that they can feel, the government that they can see every day.
So there might be some procedural concerns during the voting process as well. So how do observation teams assess that?
Overall, this time around?
During the election periods.
Okay, in our case, election commission runs like an automatic machine. As you may know, that we have only got 3 members. We don't even have a chief election commissioner. It was all coordinated by just acting one. But it's still, overall, the election management process and the polling activities and all the procedures were somehow intact, right? But in some cases, because I think they don't have enough resources or not standardized training, that has been cascaded up to the local level to the polling center. So there were issues of non-conformity and inconsistencies with regards to how to deal with some of the cases during the polling process. We witnessed that.
Okay.
Like, for example,
any recommendations as well?
Yeah, of course, more training is required for the election officials and the staff members. That is very, very much important in order to maintain consistency and uniformity throughout. And of course, now this is the time of digital era, So we should digitalize more than the manual one, so that everything goes faster and hopefully more reliable, depending on what degree of confidence we can generate among general public. And secondly, I have one very critical and very important recommendation with regards to counting. First of all, fairing, because fairing is related to the counting process. Bangladesh, for example, where the population is more than 5 times bigger than ours, but the counting takes place right at the polling center, and it goes. You are there, right? This time around,
Yes, yes.
it went largely very smoothly, and within 2-3 hours of time, everybody knows the indicators are already there. Who is going to win?
That in a way elongates the task of election observers
Here
as
is
well.
tough. Yeah, here is it's very tricky. We believe in. Well, Nepal is known as a very peaceful country. Right? We are a peace-loving country, the country of Lord Buddha. But again, why we have some speculation that if we count the ballot papers,
Manually?
right, and the polling center, we'll have a big fiasco. That is the perceived threat and perceived fear is already there. That needs to be removed so that because if it is done locally, everybody knows. Because everybody knows everyone, right? So there won't be much kind of problem with regards to dealing with the cases. But ferrying as such, ferrying like on a mule or helicopters or on the back, etc., on a vehicle in a dilapidated road in the mountain, why should we be doing that? That is exactly what needs to be rectified in the upcoming election, definitely.
So we are almost at the end of this. So I'd like to ask Rosa that based on your observations, what improvements would you recommend to strengthen Nepal's future elections?
Well, let's talk about accessibility. So
Okay.
there's really a need to address accessibility in future elections, and just like what we've mentioned earlier, reasonable accommodations, practical accommodations can already be done by the Election Commission together with other government agencies to increase accessibility of the elections for persons with disability and aging voters. Another recommendation is to have more trainings with the security forces, especially coming from the Election Commission of Nepal, given that the number one concern, or probably one of the top concerns that we encounter in today's exercise, is the lack of access or the limited access to the polling stations that our observers had access to in this today.
So Brisa, what would be your recommendations?
Probably one that close to our heart. It's
Okay.
more on raising awareness with regard to the function of citizen observers. So we start with the guidelines with the Election Commission to take a look, to improve the guidelines with the Election Commission, put the rights and responsibilities of in protection for citizen observers, and at the same time, the functionality. So at least it addresses also the concerns with regard to training, because just like what I have mentioned, we face limitation and restriction today with regard to the access of polling stations. So that's something hopefully can be addressed in the next elections.
Okay, with us we have come almost to the end of this episode. I would like to thank all of you, all three of you, for sharing your valuable insights with us and observations with us, your perspectives to help us to better understand the electoral process and how today's election has been conducted. Thank you all.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So viewers, we have come almost to the end of this episode. We'll continue to bring you the latest election updates in the coming hours as well. For now, thank you for watching us, and do stay tuned with NTV World.
Dai Lake in Karnali province is a geographically remote district, yet rich with untapped potential for tourism. Stepping into Dai Lake, celebrated as a treasure trove of Khas art, culture and heritage, brings a unique sense of joy. Journey begins amid its natural beauty, leading us toward Mahabu Rural Municipality. As we leave the mid-hill highway, the terrain becomes challenging, with hilly, muddy roads demanding patience and skill. Long lines of vehicles crawl carefully along the cliffs, reflecting both the difficulty of the route, and the enduring devotion of Mahabudham, many travelers choose to continue on foot, advancing step by step toward